It was a night like any other in Santa Monica. But on the night of March 15th, something went terribly wrong inside a modest bungalow on this unassuming street. A candle was burning, a gas stove was hissing, and behind that locked door, a deadly secret was waiting to be uncovered. When police made their way inside, they never could have imagined what they were about to find. There were signs of a struggle, evidence of a violent, desperate fight for survival. And in the back bedroom, they found Juliana. But as investigators would soon learn, the scene inside that house was only the beginning of a twisted web of secrets, obsession, and betrayal. And behind it all, one suspect who slipped away, leaving behind more questions than answers. Juliana Redding was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona, where she attended Salpointe Catholic High School. By all accounts, her childhood was filled with warmth and happiness, marked by a close bond with her family. After graduating, Juliana set her sights on California, driven by dreams of becoming a model. But modeling wasn't her ultimate goal. Deep down, she harbored a bigger ambition. She wanted to be an entrepreneur. She often shared her vision with her parents, Patricia and Greg, telling them that one day she hoped to open her own boutique. After settling in Los Angeles, Juliana stayed in close contact with her family, regularly checking in with them. She frequently called her parents to update them on her life and progress toward her goals. Text messages were another way they stayed connected, and from time to time, she'd visit Tucson to spend time with them. By 2008, Juliana was living on her own in a cozy bungalow in Santa Monica, balancing her life as a student at Santa Monica College. To earn some extra cash, Juliana took a job as a restaurant hostess while still pursuing opportunities in modeling and acting. For the moment, life seemed to be going smoothly for her. She appeared content with her path, balancing work, school, and her dreams. But everything took a dark turn on March 16th of that year. That day, her mother, Patricia, suddenly found herself unable to reach Juliana. Calls and texts went unanswered. Little did anyone know this would mark the beginning of a nightmare. What we do know is that on March 15th, Juliana spent her day playing a round of golf. Later, she returned to her bungalow and decided to have a quiet evening, relaxing with some TV, specifically watching reruns of Seinfeld. But by the next day, things took a troubling turn. Patricia's worry grew when she received a call from Juliana's neighbors. They mentioned they hadn't seen her all day, and what was even more alarming, her dog was inside the bungalow. But the place itself seemed eerily empty. Something wasn't right. Growing increasingly anxious, Patricia kept calling Juliana's phone, hoping with every ring that her daughter would pick up. But each call went unanswered, and none were returned. At first, she tried to convince herself that Juliana was just busy. But as the hours passed and it reached 6 p.m. with still no response, Patricia's unease turned into a gut-wrenching fear. Deep down, she knew something was wrong. That's when she made the difficult decision. It was time to call the police. Patricia wasted no time in explaining the situation to investigators, pleading for them to perform a welfare check. The officers agreed and headed over to Juliana's bungalow. Upon arriving, they looked around the property, but nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Her car was still in the driveway, a clear indication that she hadn't gone far and should be home. Yet the bungalow was unsettlingly quiet, as if it had been frozen in time. Something felt off, but there were no immediate signs of trouble. However, once the officers stepped inside the bungalow, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. Right at the entrance, they spotted a candle burning, a detail that felt oddly out of place. But what truly alarmed them was the strong smell of natural gas. Following the scent, they traced it to a gas stove left on, but with no flame, just an open burner releasing gas into there. The bungalow had become a ticking time bomb, one spark away from disaster. The unsettling scene raised far more questions than answers. What came next was even more chilling. As the officers searched through the bungalow, they eventually reached the back bedroom. There they found Juliana, but tragically, it was too late. She was no longer alive. Detectives quickly determined the cause of death. Juliana had been strangled. But the scene told another story as well. It was clear she hadn't gone down without a fight. The signs of a struggle were undeniable, evidence that she had fiercely resisted her attacker. The peaceful life she had built had come to a violent and heartbreaking end. The signs of a violent struggle were scattered throughout the apartment, pointing to a brutal confrontation. This was further confirmed when investigators discovered Juliana's own DNA under her fingernails, a clear indication that she had fought desperately to pry her attackers' hands from her throat. Yet, despite the intensity of the struggle, there were few clues left behind to identify who had taken her life. One thing was chillingly clear, though: whoever had entered the apartment had sinister plans to cover their tracks. The open gas lines suggested that they intended to destroy all evidence by blowing up the apartment. The investigators theorized that the gas leaking from the stove was meant to ignite with the burning candle, triggering an explosion that could obliterate crucial evidence at the scene. However, due to the building's age, it seemed the gas had never accumulated enough to create a catastrophic blast. As the investigation progressed, detectives began to reconstruct the events that likely unfolded in the moments before Juliana's tragic death, piecing together a harrowing timeline of what had transpired that fateful evening. Detectives theorized that someone had entered Juliana's bungalow around 10 p.m. on the night of March 15th. Once inside, they launched a violent attack against her, inflicting injuries to her head by slamming it against the floor. This brutal assault was not a quick encounter. It was drawn out, suggesting that the assailant had not anticipated the fierce resistance Juliana would put up. Faced with her unexpected strength and determination, they ultimately resorted to strangulation, a chilling decision that would seal her fate. It later emerged that, in her desperate bid for help, Juliana had tried to contact emergency services. Her phone records revealed that she dialed 911, but tragically, the call ended before it could connect. The neighbors who had alerted Patricia also shared with the officers that they heard noises coming from Juliana's apartment around 9:53 that night, sounds of furniture being moved and someone screaming. Yet they admitted they hadn't seen anyone suspicious in or around the building. It's disheartening to think that they didn't take those alarming sounds more seriously, as they could have potentially made a life-saving difference. Still, it's hard to place all the blame on the neighbors. As they pointed out, everything appeared normal at first glance. The sounds could easily have been mistaken for a small gathering or a lively get-together. Meanwhile, investigators meticulously collected evidence from the scene, gathering several DNA samples. These were found on various surfaces, including the front door of the building, Juliana's phone, her clothing, and even on her throat. Each piece of evidence could hold the key to unraveling the mystery of her tragic death. The collected DNA samples were sent off for analysis, but it would take time to determine who had entered Juliana's apartment. In the meantime, investigators reached out to her family and friends, gathering insights into her life and the people who were a part of it. During these interviews, Juliana's father mentioned a man named John Gilmore, suggesting that police look into him. John had shared an on-again, off-again relationship with Juliana, and her father felt it was worth investigating whether he might be connected to her tragic fate. Juliana's father expressed his growing concern about her relationship with John Gilmore. When he learned they were dating, he knew of Gilmore's violent temper, which had raised red flags in the past. There was an incident where Gilmore had kicked in Juliana's car door during a heated argument, and there were also reports of him forcing his way into her apartment. These troubling behaviors made her father worry that Juliana might be in danger, underscoring the importance of investigating Gilmore's potential involvement in her tragic death. When investigators received this information, it felt like a breakthrough, perhaps the lead they had been searching for. They wasted no time in their efforts to locate John Gilmore, and it didn't take long before they tracked him down. During his interview, Gilmore claimed that he had gone to Juliana's bungalow that Sunday morning, but despite seeing her car parked in the driveway, he received no answer at the door. His statement raised eyebrows, especially considering the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Investigators were keen to dig deeper, sensing that they were on the brink of uncovering the truth. Gilmore recounted that he peered through the security gate but could only see the burning candle flickering inside. He claimed he didn't smell any gas at the time. When investigators confronted him about the reported violent incidents in their relationship, he admitted that there had been fights between him and Juliana. He acknowledged one particularly heated argument that took place on Saturday night, centered around his plans for that evening. His willingness to discuss their turbulent relationship only intensified the investigators' interest in him as a potential suspect. Gilmore explained that he had called Juliana to inform her he planned to hang out with some friends that night, a decision that clearly upset her. She abruptly ended the call. He asserted that after their conversation, Juliana chose to spend the evening with one of her own friends. As for him, he went to a house party at a residence just a few miles away from her apartment. This account raised further questions for investigators, who wondered if this seemingly casual evening could be linked to the violence that unfolded later. Although there was evident tension between them, Gilmore stated that they continued to text back and forth throughout the evening. However, around 10 p.m., Juliana suddenly stopped responding. Concerned, he tried reaching out again the next morning, calling her and sending multiple text messages, but once more he received no reply. This lack of communication only heightened his unease, especially given the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Investigators took note of this timeline, considering how it might fit into the unfolding. This prompted him to go to Juliana's building, but after finding no sign of her, he felt he had no choice but to leave. Despite being the primary suspect in her disappearance, Gilmore's name was soon cleared thanks to surveillance footage from that night. The security cameras captured him visiting a convenience store and later a Jack-in-the-Box restaurant, providing him with a solid alibi. Investigators began to shift their focus, knowing they needed to look elsewhere to find the person responsible for this tragic crime. Several attendees from the house party corroborated Gilmore's alibi, confirming that he had been present there between 9:45 and 10:15 p.m. when the attack occurred. His innocence was further solidified when investigators discovered that much of the DNA found in Juliana's apartment belonged to a woman rather than a man. This revelation left police with a myriad of unanswered questions, prompting them to turn their attention to the women in Juliana's life. They began the crucial task of interviewing her friends and acquaintances, seeking any leads that might illuminate the mystery surrounding her tragic death. Speculation began to swirl among investigators that someone close to Juliana might have harbored jealousy over her looks or lifestyle, or perhaps there was an underlying love triangle that had spiraled out of control. As they continued their investigation, detectives collected DNA samples from everyone they interviewed, hoping to uncover a match with the samples retrieved from her apartment. However, this effort proved fruitless, as none of the DNA matched. The lack of leads only deepened the mystery surrounding Juliana's death, leaving investigators to sift through the growing pile of unanswered questions. It was during this time that investigators uncovered the existence of another man in Juliana's life, a doctor named Munir. As they dug deeper, they learned that Juliana and Munir had met in 2007 while she was working at a restaurant. Clearly, she had made quite an impression on him, as he offered her a position as his medical assistant, which she eagerly accepted. This connection raised new questions for investigators, who began to wonder what role, if any, Munir might have played in the events leading up to Juliana's tragic fate. Working as a hostess or waitress in a restaurant typically doesn't offer much in terms of financial, especially given the challenges that come with dealing with difficult patrons. It's no surprise that Juliana eagerly seized the opportunity to earn a better income as Munir's medical assistant. However, their relationship quickly evolved beyond the professional realm, blurring the lines and complicating their dynamic. What had started as a chance for Juliana to improve, her circumstances soon developed into something deeper, something that investigators now needed to explore further. Before long, Juliana agreed to move in with Munir, enjoying the perks that came with it. He showered her with gifts and provided her with a comfortable life in his upscale Beverly Hills home. At first, this lifestyle must have felt incredibly flattering, but it wasn't long before Juliana began to feel uneasy about Munir's behavior. What had started as affection soon turned into something more unsettling. She sensed an obsession brewing beneath the surface. This shift in their relationship left her feeling increasingly trapped, raising new alarms about her safety and well-being. Munir made grand gestures, telling Juliana he wanted to buy her an expensive car for her 21st birthday and even suggesting that they get married. While the allure of a lavish lifestyle was undeniable, after all, he was a wealthy man, Juliana couldn't shake the feeling of unease that came with his generosity. His tendency to splurge on jewelry, cars, and other women overwhelmed her, and she found his extravagant lifestyle concerning. The disparity between the luxury he offered and the control she felt began to weigh heavily on her, making her question whether this relationship was truly what she wanted. It remains unclear whether Munir misinterpreted Juliana's signals or if he was merely projecting his own desires onto their relationship, engaging in some form of delusional, wishful thinking. Regardless, his behavior took a turn for the bizarre, prompting Juliana to recognize that she needed to find a way out. Finally, gathering her courage, Juliana decided to end her relationship with Munir. She relocated to her bungalow in Santa Monica, a place her father was helping to finance. Surprisingly, their breakup was amicable, with the pair parting on seemingly good terms. However, as she settled into her new life, Juliana could not shake the nagging feeling that she needed to remain vigilant, aware that her decision to leave might not be the end of her troubles. To many, it was surprising that Juliana and Munir stayed in touch even after their breakup. In fact, one of Juliana's friends later revealed that the three of them had taken a trip to Las Vegas to celebrate her friend's birthday. However, beneath this facade of friendship, there were troubling signs. Juliana's father began to delve into Munir's background, and what he discovered was deeply unsettling. As he unearthed information about Munir, it became increasingly clear that there was much more to this man than met the eye, raising alarms about the potential dangers that lay ahead for Juliana. Juliana's father uncovered a shocking truth. Munir was not only married at the time of his relationship with Juliana, but he also had 3 children living in Lebanon. This revelation painted a very different picture of the man Juliana had been involved with. Her father was certain that Munir's family was completely unaware of Juliana or any of the other women he had been associated with. Disturbed by what he had discovered, he wasted no time in relaying this information to his daughter, hoping to protect her from any potential fallout from being involved with someone who had such a hidden life. Juliana was taken aback and deeply upset by the shocking news about Munir. Without hesitation, she told him that she no longer wanted to see him and insisted he never speak to her. Again, a decision that, in hindsight, was undoubtedly the right move. While Juliana severed ties with Munir, her father, Greg, who worked as a pharmacist, continued to communicate with him. as they had been discussing a potential business deal together. However, Greg's concerns about Munir's questionable business practices soon led to the deal falling through. As more evidence began to accumulate against Munir, it became increasingly clear that he was not the man he had pretended to be, raising even more alarm bells for Juliana and her family. As investigators continued to dig deeper, it became increasingly clear that Munir was not the man he had portrayed himself to be. They found it particularly strange that Juliana's life was tragically cut short just a week after the business deal between her father and Munir had soured. This timing raised serious suspicions about Munir's involvement. Investigators began to believe he might know much more than he was admitting. However, it was essential to note that his DNA had not been found at the scene of the crime, leaving a critical gap in the evidence. This contradiction only fueled the detective's determination to uncover the truth behind Juliana's untimely death. Unfortunately, investigators were unable to interview Munir at the time, as he had left the country, an all too convenient development. Undeterred, they began to investigate his past, particularly his history with women, which was known to be somewhat sordid. Their focus shifted to examining the women who had worked for him in the past, hoping to uncover any connections that might tie them to the case. Given their suspicions that the female DNA found at the crime scene could somehow be linked to Munir, they pressed on, though they lacked the concrete proof needed to validate their theories. The web of connections was becoming increasingly complex, and the search for answers was far from over. Most of Munir's former female employees were either out of contact with him or had no knowledge of Juliana. However, as investigators dug deeper, they stumbled upon a concerning connection with a 47-year-old woman named Kelly Soo Park. The discovery that Munir had made several substantial payments to her, totaling over $1 million in just 18 months, raised even more suspicions. The sheer magnitude of these transactions suggested a complicated and potentially troubling relationship, prompting detectives to wonder whether Kelly might have insights into Munir's actions or even his possible connection to Juliana's death. This revelation added yet another layer of intrigue to an already complex case. Kelly Soo Park had been involved in several of Munir's business dealings during her time as a real estate broker, which further fueled the investigators' suspicions. While they couldn't definitively link Park to the attack on Juliana, they decided to keep a close eye on her, hoping to discreetly collect a sample of her DNA without her knowledge. Given the delicate nature of the situation, it was crucial that they remained under the radar. If she caught wind that the authorities were interested in her, she might alert Munir, potentially compromising their investigation. The decision was made to follow her covertly, seeking any opportunity to gather evidence that could finally provide clarity in this tangled web of relationships and motives. Their patience paid off when investigators managed to collect a discarded cigarette butt belonging to Kelly Soo Park, which was then sent for analysis. Before long, they received the breakthrough they had been hoping for. Park's DNA matched perfectly with the samples collected from Juliana's bungalow. This critical development raised serious questions about her potential involvement in the tragic events surrounding Juliana's death, propelling the investigation forward in a significant way. With the DNA evidence firmly linking Kelly Soo Park to the scene of the crime, there was now no doubt that she had been present during the attack on Juliana. Investigators were increasingly convinced that Munir was also somehow involved, yet he remained elusive, having not returned to the U.S. This left authorities with no choice but to move forward with what they could control. Park was apprehended and immediately charged with the crime against Juliana, marking a pivotal moment in the investigation. As the case began to unfold in the courtroom, questions loomed about the extent of Munir's involvement and whether he would ever face justice for his role in this tragic story. Just a few days after Kelly Soo Park's arrest, it was believed that Munir became aware of the situation and subsequently vanished without a trace. Investigators suspected he had fled to Lebanon, likely attempting to evade law enforcement. However, even as the pieces of the case began to come together, one critical question remained. The motive behind Juliana's tragic death was still shrouded in mystery. Without a clear understanding of why someone would want to harm her, the investigation faced a daunting challenge. As detectives continued to search for answers, the complexity of the case deepened, leaving everyone involved eager for resolution. As the investigation progressed, several theories began to emerge regarding Munir's potential motives. It was suggested that he may not have taken kindly to the end of his relationship with Juliana, or that he became enraged when his business deal with her father fell through. This led investigators to theorize that he had hired Park to carry out the attack as an act of retaliation. One of the most widely accepted theories posited that Munir had instructed Park to intimidate Greg into accepting the deal they had been negotiating. In this chilling scenario, Park was allegedly tasked with paying an unfriendly visit to Juliana in her apartment as part of this intimidation tactic. The idea that a personal vendetta could escalate to such tragic consequences sent shockwaves through the investigation and the community alike. However, the theory took a darker turn when it was suggested that when Juliana began to fight back against Park, she was caught off guard, resulting in a fatal struggle for survival. This theory posited that in the heat of the moment, Park ended Juliana's life, but it remained just that theory, pending further evidence. As the case moved to court, this aspect of the story would come into play, with arguments that Munir had agreed to pay Park a six-figure sum to execute his plan. The chilling notion that financial motives could drive someone to commit such a horrific act added another layer of complexity to the already tragic narrative, leaving the jury to grapple with the unsettling dynamics of manipulation, betrayal, and ultimately, loss of life. When news of Kelly Soo Park's arrest broke, the media quickly began to investigate her background, and the Los Angeles Times revealed alarming details. It turned out that Park had a history of intimidating individuals who dared to oppose Munir's business plans. This pattern of behavior made it all the more plausible that she had been involved in Juliana's tragic case as well. For instance, there was an incident where she had intimidated a bank manager after he canceled a business deal, and in another case, she was instructed to intimidate one of Munir's clients who had failed to adhere to their payment commitments. These revelations painted a picture of a woman willing to resort to intimidation and coercion to protect Munir's interests, raising further questions about her role in the events leading up to Juliana's death. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as more pieces of the puzzle came to light, revealing a web of manipulation and control that seemed to spiral ever deeper. Despite the overwhelming evidence linking Kelly Soo Park to the scene of Juliana's tragic death, including DNA findings and other incriminating materials found in Juliana's bungalow, Park chose to plead not guilty to the second-degree homicide charges. Her defense team proposed a striking narrative. They claimed that the two women had never met, asserting that the only connection between them was Munir, who remained out of the country. This defense strategy aimed to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors, suggesting that Park's involvement was circumstantial rather than direct. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution prepared to dismantle this defense, eager to illustrate the chilling relationship between Park and Munir and the potential motive that lay behind Juliana's untimely demise. The unfolding drama captivated those present, each detail weaving a complex tapestry of deceit, jealousy, and tragedy. The prosecution, however, was determined to demonstrate that Kelly Soo Park had been hired by Munir as an enforcer, alleging that her attempt at intimidation ultimately resulted in Juliana's tragic death. They aimed to paint a picture of a calculated plot, driven by Munir's desire for control and retribution. But their plans took an unexpected turned when the judge ruled that this theory could not be introduced during the trial, citing a lack of solid evidence to support such claims. This ruling meant that the state had to focus solely on the tangible evidence collected at the scene, particularly the DNA that was definitively matched to Park. As the trial progressed, the tension in the courtroom escalated. The jury was left to grapple with the stark reality of the evidence presented, while the prosecution fought to make their case compelling enough to hold Park accountable for her actions. The stakes were high, as the truth behind this complex web of relationships hung in the balance, and the quest for justice for Juliana Redding pressed on. The tragic ending of Juliana's story left a ripple of questions and heartache, and we may never know every detail of what happened that night. But cases like these remind us just how fragile life can be, and how sometimes those closest to us hold secrets we'd never suspect. If you found this case as compelling as we did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on our next story. We dive into the details, uncover the facts, and bring you the cases that leave us all wondering what really happened. And if you've got theories, thoughts, or ideas, we'd love to hear them. Drop a comment below. Our community loves discussing every angle and every clue. Thanks for joining us, and remember, the truth may be closer than it appears. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.